Hello again, and I've foregrounded some books because this chapter is college themed. When I first went to college, I wasn't 100% sure what I was going for, as a lot of students, but I was convinced a lot by other people that it would be a good idea. So I went and was going to try. And a lot of people saw me as becoming a preacher, and that attracted me in a lot of ways, but I didn't want to do that at all, partly just because of the stereotype that preachers have, but also just because it was never hearing preaching that had made the big impact in my life. I was friends with preachers, but it was personal conversations with them and my own study that had the major impact on me, um, and a lot of other things. But I just didn't feel like that was holistic, actually, because I had always found it very important to me, this emphasis of Jesus on helping the poor. He wasn't just going around talking. He was helping people. He was healing people. He was feeding people. He was doing all this, and so I thought, well, this is my opportunity to figure out a way to serve people in that way, and in the talking and sharing part, well, that's I'm going to do that automatically because I just that's how I am. But as it turns out, not really, because I'm just not confrontational, and I'm very, very cautious about getting into a religious conversation with people, even though I'm more interested in that than anything. Um, because I don't want to be pushy, because I don't want to actually like harass or hurt them. And um, well, when I first went, I met a lot of Chinese students, which I thought was awesome, and I started befriending them pretty quickly. And because of this complication of mine about religious things, that didn't last, and I knew that was a problem because see, most of them were atheists, and I really liked them, but I felt like to be their friend and not share my faith was wrong because they were atheists. But if I tried to share my faith, which I did a couple times, I felt just so icky about how the conversation went, and I felt like I harassed the person. And so I didn't know how to be friends with a group of atheists, basically, who were people I really liked from a country I thought was fascinating. And so I kind of backed off. It's crazy, but that's where I was. And actually, I've had something like that dynamic with a lot of people in a lot of situations in my life. But that's where I experienced it the strongest and realized that it was an issue with me. I had started learning Chinese and everything. Um, so I was trying to figure out, how I was going to serve people in a holistic way, and I chose a social work major and was studying social work for 1 or 2 semesters. And I was struck by how, they were like, from the very beginning, you are going to get burnt out in this field. And the way that they presented it was exhausting. It was like, oh man, basically the whole goal was, let's get everyone that we possibly can as much equal access as possible to like resources, psychological and material and social resources. And it was just exhausting how it was all presented. And it was like it's impossible, but you just got to try. And I kept gravitating the um, toward the spiritual. Like, I kept going back to this journal in the social work department that was about how to incorporate Celtic spirituality in social work. And I was like, does anybody really do this? Isn't that like, how could you do that and it wouldn't be considered unethical? Do you just kind of internalize this for yourself? Maybe. Well, I did. But at the same time, this was a Christian university, and so my favorite part was actually the mandatory Bible classes that I had to take on the side. And in one of those, the teacher was an avowed, like he believed in the theory of evolution, and a lot of parents would send nasty letters to the school about him. And I was really uncomfortable with him, but he was also one of my favorites, because he opened up some of the things that I had been scared of, but wanted to know about, like the Babylonian creation epic that I mentioned last time. He got all into that and how that relates to the Bible, and he helped us see, okay, um, that that basically, the way that the Bible is written is not written for modern people. It has a completely ancient worldview of what the universe is shaped like and how it works. And he like took us into that world. And it was really surreal for me, because I actually found myself seeing the world that way. But I knew that it was scientifically backward. And so I was like, this is really weird. At one and the same time, I feel like this ancient worldview is the real one, but at the same time, I know that it's not, and so I don't know what's real. Well, I had this the highest crisis point, or one type. I've had several of those, but one of the most crisis points of my faith ever, which was that I actually had a moment where I thought that I had lost my faith and I would never be able to believe again. And I was in my dorm room on a third floor, and I pictured throwing myself out the window, because that's all I wanted to do at the time. And that's the closest I ever came to like a suicidal ideation. But it was very, I mean, it was terrifying. But it's the opposite of terrifying. Terrifying is like a heightening, but it was like a deadening, like this sickening feeling of everything being lost, not just my own life, but the entire universe being lost. And anyway, I pushed through it, and this same person helped me. He didn't know how much he was doing so, but he was helping me put the pieces back together. He shattered my faith and helped me put it back together in a way that was honest about reality and about the ancient world and things like that. And I was so excited about that like it was brand new. Like I started my faith over brand new, like destroyed it and started it over brand new in a matter of weeks. And then I was just honest with myself about how I had been drawn toward the spiritual, and I realized that in the mission arena, they really were trying to do the same thing that you're trying to do in social work. They were trying to serve the needs of people, but I felt they were trying to do it holistically, and spirituality was the component. And I felt that they weren't just pushing this religious line. They were like really trying to understand people and serve them where they were at. And so I just couldn't resist, and I did the thing that I said I was never going to do, and I became a Bible and missions major, and also became a Spanish major. And I joined a organization that was founded by Latino students that were there from Central America, and was just doing activities and cultural events that was raising support for schools for underprivileged people back in their countries and things like that. And at the same time, I got involved in the summers in an inner city church in Houston, because that was near where my parents lived at the time, and I wanted that inner city experience. I just wanted to go everywhere that I could, learn everything I could. And that features mainly in my next chapter. But that church is amazing. But I read a book that first summer called Unclean, that was about, getting past your way of seeing other people as unclean, primarily based in Jesus and how he ignored and actually embraced people's uncleanness in a way. And that was super uncomfortable for me, but I just embraced that. I couldn't help myself. And another thing was I came down with a digestive disorder that was excruciatingly painful, interrupted my first major mission experience, and kind of derailed the whole mission project that I was pushing toward, and was the first of a series of attacks of that in my life. So that became a big part of my experience of suffering firsthand. You know, I'd always thought people go to the doctor too much. Well, now I had to go to the doctor all the time and was dependent on my life on medicine. So it was humbling, and yeah, it's just, this became a big thing, you know, in later chapters. But let's see, what else? The kingdom. Okay. The thing that was really making me lose my faith, during this whole time, I never thought evolution made any sense. So that wasn't the main thing that was eating away at my faith. It was the internal contradiction of how religious people and systems were doing things, and our interpretation of the Bible that was fragmented and like I said, not holistic. What I learned about the ancient worldview, that when you kind of bring it forward into your faith, kind of heals it, is something I'd noticed a long time earlier, actually. But when I'd asked about it, I had just been kind of brushed off. I had noticed that as a kid that the Bible says there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. And I was like, what does that mean? Because I really liked that. And I was told, well, I mean, that's just another way of talking about heaven. But the earth is going to be destroyed, like totally, and like there's going to be no universe left, just heaven. I'm like, okay. But we had songs that talked about heaven, like there was going to be an earth there, you know. And it was because I didn't know, but it's because there were certain other religious groups that taught that that's true, and we didn't want to be like them, so so we only believed in heaven and not earth as part of God's plan for the future. But you know, but I kept looking at that for myself, and that didn't make much sense. And then I learned that the whole, you know, everything the Bible says about that, and everything that the early church for centuries said about that, they really strongly believed in this idea that the earth is in a state of corruption. I mean, just look around. We're subject to death. We're just in a mess of things, you know, politically, socially, spiritually. You know, there's poverty, there's exploitation, there's all these different things. But what the Bible is all about is how God intends to fix that, to heal the world. And I was like, okay, this is real. This is something I can get on board with. And so that's the direction it went. In all of this, I found out about an organization called Pioneer Bible Translators. And I'd always been super fascinated by linguistics, and I'd never felt totally comfortable with the idea of just going somewhere to evangelize people. But this was a really holistic mission. So it was a group of one of several groups of people that are going and basically just plugging into becoming part of communities around the world, mostly that are out of the mainstream of like technology and Western culture, because they tend to be very poor, and they don't have access to a lot of things, but also they don't have a lot of written literature for the same reasons. Maybe they don't even have their own language developed, and they definitely don't have the Bible. So the central point of the mission is translating the Bible, and it's really just, it's equipping people who speak that language, who already are interested in Jesus and want to be able to read the Bible in their own language, equipping them with people who know biblical languages to be able to translate it. And that's a movement going on around the world. The Bible will probably be the first book, or I should say collection of books, that's translated into every living language in the world. And the reason that doesn't really bother me as like an imperialistic move is because it's all about empowering the people who are the indigenous people who are part of this project. And it actually gives them a way to record their own stories and traditions that in many cases are under threat of dying out. And that's actually really important to me too. But I'll get more into that in the next chapter.